Hello, everyone. I am very excited to be here today with all of you for this special fireside chat as part of the Women in Data Science initiative here at Microsoft. Today, I have the privilege of being joined by two amazing leaders here at Microsoft, Sarah Bird and Jeana Jorgensen. And I can't wait to hear all about their journeys and lessons learned in our discussion shortly. Before we get started, I want to quickly highlight that the Women in Data Science initiative started as a workshop in 2018 as part of the MLATS conference and has since grown significantly, having had more than 12 community events and 14 workshops, as well as a revamped mentorship program. So please join. We have hit 1,300 members as part of our community, which is truly amazing to see. In addition to our fantastic speakers, I want to give a huge shout out to Hao and Shijing for driving and leading this community through its many successful events, including this one. So big thank you to both of you. So for some logistics, today our meeting is going to be broken into two parts. We're going to start with a panel discussion with our speakers for the first 45 minutes, where we will be tackling some of the pre-surveyed questions that a lot of you helped us set up. Then we will jump into a live Q&A where we will take questions from the folks here. So feel free to submit your questions via chat and we will fully get to that. So let me start with a brief introduction. I'll introduce the speakers briefly and then I'll hand it over to them. My name is Jeana Bazazeh. I am your host today. I am a senior data science manager here at the Ideas org in Microsoft, where I primarily focus on scaling and standardizing experimentation practices across the E&D org and empowering teams to make confident, data-driven decisions at scale. I also work in helping them identify and size new opportunities and partnering with product teams to translate those into actionable strategies that can help improve our user experiences. So let's start with Jeana Jorgensen. She is our Corporate Vice President of Worldwide Learning here at Microsoft, dedicated to inspiring every person and organization in the planet to learn more. Jeana, do you want to take it?
Sure. Thanks for having me, first off. So great to be here. So I lead the Worldwide Learning Organization, and our job is to become the leader in workforce skilling, right? If you think about what the Khan Academy is for education, we want to be the Khan Academy equivalent for the commercial environment. We spent a lot of time focused on skilling organizations. So think about our partners, our customer organizations, as well as individual learners. And that's across every audience type. That's from K through 12 student all the way through to the person of the highest technical competence in an organization. We also, about 15% of my team focuses on skilling our 65,000 person MCAPS sales force. And so our job is to make sure that we have the most effective and efficient, if you will, sales force in the industry.
Wow, that is truly amazing. Thank you, Jeana. Moving to Sarah Bird, she's our Chief Product Officer of Responsible AI here at Microsoft, leading the RAI engineering efforts across the company, which, as you all know, is super important in this ever-evolving AI world. Sarah, do you want to take it from here?
Yeah, so, my team is pretty fun. We have kind of a wide range of things that we have to work on. So first starting with, hey, there's a lot of new AI technology coming out every day, if you haven't noticed. And with this exciting new technology, we also see new risk. And so my team, works with experts in research, experts on different types of risks. These days we're looking at things like cybersecurity risks and chemical weapons, but it also includes fairness and, a wide range of things. And so the first part of our team looks at this new technology and says, what are the risks that we need to address, and develops new approaches to address those risks. How do we test for the risk? How do we mitigate the risk? Now, we don't just want to publish a paper and call it a day. We want to make it easy for everyone to do this. And so the middle part of my team team takes these new techniques and builds them into production tools and systems and practices that make it easy for Microsoft to apply responsible AI in practice, but also to make it easy for our customers who are building with AI to do the same thing as well. And the last part of my team looks at how we actually ensure that we are meeting the new state-of-the-art standard that we're constantly setting for ourselves. And so we look at new regulations coming in and how we need to implement those in Microsoft. We run the deployment safety board, which is the release review process for everything generative AI in the company. And so that creates a really nice feedback loop, because we learn from having risk assessors looking at everything that's shipping in the company, what risk are we actually seeing materialize in practice, and making sure that our tools and our processes and our practices are equipped to address those risks. And if they aren't, then we go back to the beginning and start with that basic research to figure out how to go at that. So it's a pretty wild ride these days with how quickly AI is changing.
Definitely. And I can tell you, as data scientists, it's always REI is, top of mind for us, part of our everyday. So thank you for leading that and being at the forefront, shaping it for us. So maybe we can start with a fun icebreaker question. And I love this. So if you were to swap roles with anyone in the tech industry for a day, who would it be and why? And maybe Jeana, we'll start with you.
Yeah. Well, after hearing Sarah, I kind of want to swap with Sarah, but I also don't want anybody to know I'm in that job. But so it's a very interesting role. I was thinking about this a lot, because I always think about who do I admire in the industry and who do I love learning from? And, I gotta be honest, Brad Smith is somebody for me who is really inspiring. He is out shaping the way that, not only individuals, but the way countries will navigate technology and the way that people are going to flourish through the AI economy. And I think he has such an insightful, interesting job. Now, would I want anybody to know I was in that job? No, I would just literally like to be a fly on the wall as a shadow Brad for a while, because I think he's just incredible in the hottest seat in the company, right? In terms of, he takes on a lot of really, I would say, controversial conversations. He has to have a very disarming demeanor, but he also just gets to see how the world is shaping with AI, and he can set policy around it with local governments and just have an impact that goes far beyond what I think I could ever dream of doing at a global scale. So it's amazing to watch him in action.
I'm laughing because my answer would be very similar, because I spend all of my time on the technology side of the house and how do we go address these things with technology. But we all know that, AI is driving enormous transformation across the world, across every single industry. And so it's not enough just to address these things with technology. We need to look at policy and regulation. We need to look at something that you were mentioning, Jeana, around upskilling and learning, right? How do we actually design the new workforce, the new education, everything to really make this technology work well with humans in practice. And so, if I could switch for a day, I definitely would want to be more on the inside of perhaps, like a government looking at how they are going to, bring this into their country safely, or one of these kind of external initiatives, and very much a place where Brad is spending a lot of his time.
Wow, Brad, he does have a big role, and honestly, it's very admiring. Well, thank you. I think this is a good segue for our next question. Given your vast experiences both in Microsoft and at Google and at Meta, leading high-tech, initiatives, you had the unique opportunity to drive significant impact. How have these experiences shaped your journey, and what advice would you give to individuals either starting their, career, or they're, in the middle of their career within the field? Jeana?
Oh, you want me to go first? Okay, great. First I will say, I spent 20 years at Microsoft, and I left to Google for a number of years, and then I just recently came back to Microsoft in last June. And just getting the experience of going outside and working at a different company. While I love Microsoft and I've always been loyal to Microsoft, it was really helpful for me to see, where did Microsoft have room for growth areas, right? What could we learn from Google that we actually could take back to Microsoft? And Google's an amazing company in and of itself. I would say the thing that I really appreciated about Microsoft was its principled decision making. and its ability to programatize things in a way that it's beyond what I have ever experienced at any smaller company or big major tech company. But the advice I would give is a really interesting one. It's more generic advice. And so I have sort of three things for anybody when like working, especially in this stage, and how do you stay up on AI? One is show up. Right? Think about how you participate in life, right? How do you show up in meetings? Are you sitting in meetings and just staying quiet the whole time? Or are you actually participating in your life? Are you participating in the meeting? That to me is a piece of advice that has helped me tremendously, right? And it really helped me prioritize how I spent my time, prioritize, what impact I was really having on my team, the people around me, my community. But it was a really important piece that changed, because you can kind of go on autopilot at many of these companies and many of these jobs and just go to work, do your meetings, and then you haven't really shown up, right? My thing is all about active participation. The second thing that I thought I learned a lot, and the hard way I would argue, is that balance is BS. Anybody who is on here trying to balance their work and their life and their children and their families and their friends and all of these big responsibilities we have at this company. I always say to people like, yeah, we all have a lot of work, and the technology industry is going to move really quickly around us, and we won't be able to stop that. But the thing that we can control is how we, again, show up in the world, right? And for me, when I'm at home and I'm really focused on my kids and my family. And when I'm at work, I'm really focused on everything that I'm doing at work. I never multitask anymore. I really stay focused on the thing that I'm doing in the moment to make sure I'm showing up and giving it my best effort, right? I think my team deserves that, and my family deserves that, and I deserve that, right? But again, autopilot has you ordering groceries at the same time you're trying to give an answer in this meeting and doing multiple things. And then I think the third thing that, like, the best piece of advice for me was, hey, how do we always talk about change management, and Sarah was mentioning this too, like everything's changing so quickly, it's evolving so quickly. The word change, I just removed it from my vocabulary, right? Because change signals death for many people, and they feel like, oh my gosh, there's so much change happening around me, and there's so much change, and it feels like people have a lack of control, when again, we don't control anything except for our own reactions to things. But when you talk about evolution, you get excited about it whenever I talk about how something's going to evolve, because everything's always going to evolve. It may not evolve in the way that I want it to or the way that I hope it will, but it's always going to evolve. And for me, it creates a whole different level of excitement. I no longer fear change or worry about what was no longer there. I always think about, like, we're always going to evolve. So what's next? And it just puts me in a very different state of excitement. And I know my team certainly has responded to that really positively as well, because I think people can be exhausted if it feels like everything's changing around you and you're just running all the time. But evolution feels empowering and exciting.
I really love that remark about change versus evolution. It's truly the time. Sarah?
Yeah, so first, I also started after my PhD. I started with Microsoft, and I left when I'm going to say kind of a lot of the AI talent was leaving, and Satya has done an amazing job of turning the company around, and now we see AI talent obviously flocking here. And I came back. I went to Facebook when it was still called that for a couple of years, and I came back about 6 years ago now. And I will say that experience of being somewhere else was enormously helpful in learning like what skills Microsoft had and what Microsoft was really great at, and then also what other organizations were really great at. Like Facebook, for example, is really good at mobilizing a lot of resources towards a big bet in a way that Microsoft maybe has more of a cautious portfolio approach. And so being able to add those extra tools to my toolkit was very helpful. But I'll say that you don't have to go somewhere else to do that. I've learned a ton from like people that are coming in. For example, we have a lot of exchange with people from Amazon or coming in from other organizations, and just talking to them now that they're at Microsoft about what's different and what do they see as sort of strengths of Microsoft versus strengths of the organization that they were at. And so you can sort of actively seek that experience without having to go and change companies. And I actually came back for the same reason. The sort of ethical and principled leadership of Microsoft makes it the best place in the world to do responsible AI, in my opinion. And so that's absolutely, kind of why I came back here. And as far as kind of advice that I'd give, For me, I have a PhD in machine learning systems. I started in research as a researcher. And, I actually moved over to being a PM after that, which was not a very normal transition. There were not a lot of playbooks to follow for that. And I was lucky to have like really excellent sort of mentors and sponsors who kind of helped talk me through it. But the piece of advice and it was absolutely the right choice for me, and it's turned out very well in the progression of my career. But the reason I was able to do that was because I had a good understanding of sort of my unique strengths and where those strengths could be, really put to work. I could say like weaponized, but we're going to be, valued disproportionately. And so AI is a place where you need an understanding, especially in the earlier days, of the bleeding edge research. But I also had the ability to put that cutting edge research into practice in new ways, which is exactly what we do in responsible AI, every single day. And so knowing kind of what are your strengths and then what are your weaknesses, what do you need to complement or what do you need to work on, I think is really helpful in navigating, where you spend your time, how you evolve your career and all of that. I think the second thing for me is that it's really important to collaborate. So I work in a very multidisciplinary field. I can't do, work a single day without Brad's team, for example, with Natasha Crampton's team, because it involves solutioning across policy, across algorithms, across production systems. And that's really fun to kind of flex in all of that space. And so no one can be the expert alone. You really need everybody to contribute. And that's where you get the really novel solutions, where something that none of us could have done our own, but we could only do together as a group. And, this is very much captured in our sort of one Microsoft ethos now. But it's been so important for my career to have both those collaborators and those allies and really focus on doing work together and not just, what am I doing individually? And I think the third thing is, I think that's really helped me is having what we would call in like the research world good taste or good problem selection, which is focusing on working on what is the most important problem around me that I can work on that I am well suited to address. So it goes with knowing your strengths and saying, look, I am in a position where I can do this and maybe not many people around me can, and I'm just going to go for it. And so really focusing on that, what I saw as the highest impact work or the most important problem to solve, even when maybe others weren't seeing it yet. When I started working on responsible AI, most people didn't know what that field was. And for a long time, my peers inside the company here were like, oh, it's great you're doing that, but it was like a little niche thing. And now it's something that impacts, every single AI shipping system we're shipping in the company, every single employee, every single customer. And so, I had the conviction earlier on that we weren't going to get to have AI without responsible AI. And so working on those things that you have conviction are going to be important, even if other people don't see it yet.
I love that. And something you said resonates really well with me, switching fields, starting with research, engineering. I had started with engineering, moved to research, but I, didn't find my passion and then jumped to data science. And so don't be afraid to kind of move. If something you're not passionate about, try new things, and it will only empower you because you're bringing all this wealth of, different domains with you, and it will just help you. So I love that. Thank you both. All right. So one thing I want to ask, there's an explosion of AI learning these days, right? There's so many resources, both inside and outside Microsoft. It can really be, you can easily feel overwhelmed. So how do you manage staying, current with all this rapid evolution? What are, do you have any favorites? It could be podcasts or forums that, you're always checking, daily or weekly that you would recommend to our audiences. And maybe Sarah, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I'm horrible at this, so I hope other people have good answers. But I would say that I've always learned a little bit from the human systems that are around me. So when I was in grad school, I was around all these experts in their field. And so I'd ask them, what's the important thing I should know, or what's the newest thing that should be happening? And like that was one of the reasons I liked going to research conferences the best, is to just sort of take the temperature in the air and see what's up. And, I feel like I actually still kind of apply the same approach, which is we have an enormous number of resources inside of Microsoft that are sending down, competitive teardowns or new technology updates or newsletters on like big themes from something. And there's also just tons of the sort of water cooler chat. We have lots of chats, and I try to build this into my organization as well to say, hey, did you see this new paper? It was really interesting. Or I looked at this and I thought this angle was important. And so really actually having a culture of sharing what we're learning, sharing what we're distilling is important. And so that we're all learning from each other rather than everybody has to go listen to the same podcast. And so I think that's been probably the most important approach for me. And then I would say I do like to get hands-on with all the tools and the things. It feels very different when you kind of try it out for yourself. And then I do like sort of books and approaches that put more framework or structure around something to kind of give me a new way to think about that. And so I try to kind of read certain books as well. And it's a little time dependent on which books I'm into, but that's probably my approach overall.
Love it. I definitely agree with you on the human side of it, just talking to people, right? There's so many experts and so many people are so gracious with their time and their expertise. That's what I found at this company. And I find pretty much everywhere, right? People are so forthcoming with their knowledge. And it's so lovely to have that. I'd say a couple things. So if I think about sort of the online world versus the more traditional world, I do a lot of just reading, a lot of books and magazines. There's always interesting articles coming out. And so whenever I see anything on the shelf, I'm one of those people who just has to buy the book, or I have to pick up the magazine. And early on, years ago, I read Human and Machine. And that was my first oh, that's such an interesting book, right? It sort of set the frame. And it was talking about how everybody was afraid of AI and why were they afraid of it? Because they all thought their jobs and their lives were going to be displaced. And this book really dispelled that myth early on. And so AI was just this exciting thing, even though there's still a massive amount, we can see in all of our research, a massive amount of fear with net new learners in AI, right? But when I read that book early on, it kind of assuaged all of my concerns. And so that was really helpful. On the human side, I have my partner works at Google and AI, and I spent a lot of time there. I have a lot of friends still there, a lot of friends at Amazon, and a lot of friends at Microsoft still, and we just talk about it. It's kind of pathetic and sad in many ways, but it's a social conversation that we have a lot around, like, what are you seeing that's interesting? What's going on here? And so it's just it's really inspiring to hear the way people are learning differently. And I'm always getting people recommending books, podcasts, people to follow on social. When I think about the online world, it was probably a window into my soul a little bit too much, but I love TikTok and social media. I just think it's super fascinating. It's from a learner perspective, that is the way people are learning. It is the way so many individuals are learning these days in short form. What can you teach somebody in less than 3 minutes? And so I follow a ton of creators on TikTok and Instagram and other places where they're just talking about AI and new tools that are coming out, right? And so how I sort of stay up to date on, oh, this thing was just released, or this tool was just done. And they do such a nice job. I find out some of the really good influencers, such a nice job in distilling really complicated things down into really simple form. And so, when I think I'm not really working and I'm on social media, I'm like, oh, look I'm learning something at the same time. And so it doesn't feel like work so much. But I also, the last thing that is really helpful to me is around big moments and big events. I go through and I just pour through blogs and press releases to see what do people go talk about, right? What just released? And so that's how I sort of stay ahead on competitively. What do we need to be talking about? What do we need to be skilling people on? And that can feel incessant and exhausting at times. But I find the press releases also do a really beautiful job of distilling down a whole bunch of announcements and a whole bunch of different topics into really simple form, so I can kind of understand how to pattern match that with the things we're doing at Microsoft.
That's amazing, Jeana. And I know you're at the forefront there, right? In a recent blog post, you talked a bit more about kind of fueling the AI economy with all these digital skills, which is really important these days, right? You shared that Microsoft Learn has recently introduced, AI-driven features like, personalized plans and the Ask Learning Assistant, so they're able to kind of tailor their learning experiences. So, can you elaborate more on your vision on how Microsoft Learn will evolve to address all of these, overwhelming volumes? And maybe share, there's an interesting or maybe a very awesome news you got this today. So I'd love the audience to hear that. So
yes. So a little promotion here of the AI Skills Fest. So I'll talk about that really quickly. So today we announced that Microsoft and all of our learners who participated in a 24-hour skilling blitz, which was the beginning of the AI Skills Fest, earned a Guinness World Record for the most amount of people who got skilled in a 24-hour period on AI. Pretty phenomenal. Like, we just lined up all of our partners and everyone started rowing in the same direction just to go teach a person one new skill. It wasn't a big 3-day conference. It was just a one learning blitz day, and then it's followed by 50 days of learning. And that was really exciting just to see where people at where they were at in sort of their own learning growth areas. But it stemmed from K through 12 with the Minecraft learning we did, all the way through to hackathons with AI engineers and whatnot. And so that's been super fun. That continues to go on. But one of the things I think that when we think about all of the areas that MS Learn is trying to go, MS Learn is going to stay very focused on technical skilling. It's going to stay focused on, is built on the back of documentation. And so it's going to stay there. They're very clear that they're going to stay focused on that particular audience. Yet we have a whole bunch more audiences we need to solve for in the very similar style. MS Learn is really designed, again, it was based on the back of docs. It's very deeply technical, and it's intimidating to a business user or a young student or anybody who's coming in, like a business executive even. So when we think about skilling the workforce, think about everybody who works at a company, right? You have your executive admin, to your sales force, to your engineers, right, to your test teams. So you have all of these different people, both inbound and outbound facing. And I think the thing that we really need to do as a learning audience, and one of the things we're working on right now, is how do we create that Conmigo-like experience that Khan Academy does for education. They're brilliant at it. They use very early on, we're using an AI agent that teaches in a Socratic way, which doesn't give you the answer, but it helps guide you to the right answer. And it acts as a coach, and it gives you feedback, and it creates this ability to learn in a psychologically safe environment. Whereas a lot of other things, you're learning in front of other people, in front of your coworkers, and it can be intimidating. It can be scary. And again, our research shows that 75% of business users are afraid to use AI. They're afraid to look like fraud. They're afraid to look like they're cheating. They're afraid that their boss is going to think that they don't know how to do their job, so they're using a tool to do their job. All of the things that, we as a technology company should be worried about. These people have a blocker about their own fear. And so from a skilling standpoint, my whole job is to say, how do we just remove that barrier of fear for people and get people excited about learning and teach them one skill at a time, rather than say, you now need to be an expert or you're no longer going to have a job, right? That's how a lot of people view AI right now. And so, we, just sort of working them through those various steps of proficiency. And it's all about just how do we just teach somebody the most basic entry level capability, all the way through to how do we have people who are certified deeply in a particular technology area. So that's kind of what we're doing.
Honestly, I love that. I want to echo, this feeling of, intimidation of using the tools and all the new acronyms and words. It affects us all, no matter, how much of an expert you think, you are today. In a week, you feel like there's something new. So this is really, really important that we're all, up to date with our learnings, which kind of brings me to the next question. And I think, Jeana, you answered part of it, I think, is that we often face a choice between, staying in the comfort of our familiar methods and, the potential or the effectiveness of moving on to the new AI-driven approaches. There are so many tools we have today. What are some of your favorite tools, or what advice, or which tools you'd recommend people to kind of use on their day-to-day? Maybe something that you use that helped you tremendously to shift the way you work. And I don't know, maybe Sarah, you want to start?
Yeah. It's a good way. This is something, it's a really important question. It's something like even in the AI team, we're asking ourselves, right? What are the tools we should be using, and like what is really game changing? And the same thing, kind of learning across each other in terms of what's working and what's not working. And of course, I think, we all know Microsoft Copilot, or M365 Copilot, and of course, for your personal things, you can use ChatGPT. I think it is good to like try them both and kind of understand what's going on there. But I think the interesting thing that we've really seen a huge step function in just the last couple months even is on the reasoning capability of these AI models, and also on the agentic side. And so the ability to now use this as like a thought partner to reason through more complex problems, or to use the systems for like longer form coding, for example, or like an agent that can just actually develop a lot more for you. And so a lot of my excitement now is around the coding scenarios or agentic scenarios and kind of what we can see there. And I am actually at RSA, which is a big security conference here in San Francisco today. And I was seeing some of my friends from grad school over the weekend, and the entire conversation was about vibe coding. And these are people with like PhDs in computer science. So they're pretty hardcore in what they can program. And they're like, this is game changing. I just have this agent. I tell it what it wants. It just goes codes it and I'm done. Or I wrote the code, but the agent wrote all the test case, and like I'm never going back. And so I think that those are kind of ones that I'm seeing are like really exciting right now. The other kind of capability is on the PM side of the house, being able to rapidly prototype. I was giving a talk at an offsite in Seattle last week to my organization, and I said, okay, I have this new idea. I want to build it this way. And one of my PMs during the talk that he had not seen before, went to vo.dev and started mocking this thing up that I was describing, and had a little clickable prototype for me before I had even finished my talk, which is just unbelievable as far as trying to show the vision, like way better than me waving my hands around. Now we had a prototype. And so I think what's possible is like just amazing across the board. And it's really changed just in the last couple of months. And so the like rapid prototyping and coding, I think, are probably where we're spending most of our time now with these tools.
Yeah. That's awesome. Jeana?
It's amazing. No, it's just amazing. Like I think of that and I'm like, oh my gosh. And then I worry at the same time about agent proliferation, right? And now we have agents everywhere because everyone's experimenting, which is wonderful. But at the same time, it's then, what tool do I use? When does it actually consolidate again and get down to a core set of technologies that people can rely on? And we're so in that state of autonomy and experimentation, and it's super exciting. But I just like, Sarah, hearing that, I'm like, that's just crazy amazing that we can do that, right?
Yeah.
Where it'd be like, normally they'd be like, let me come back in a month and bring you back a small proof of concept, and then we can iterate on this, right? This is all within the time of your talk. So that's crazy. I think when we think about which tools do we use, I'll kind of truncate it into or bifurcate it into a couple of different things. One, we look at AI tools all the time on how do we teach skilling in it using AI tools. So for instance, we use this tool, third-party tool running on Azure, I will say, that is called Second Nature, right? And it's a coach. It scores you and it does role playing with you. So think about it always on role play. When you're trying to learn or you're in a sales organization, you want role playing, again, in a psychologically safe environment, not in front of a customer, right? So you're role playing and it's teaching you how to have more refined answers and whatnot. We also use a tool called Eris, another third party running on Azure, that does daily knowledge checks down to people. And so we're experimenting with AI all the time. We're in the process right now of building a bot for Judson, right? That looks like him and talks like him and sounds like him and is trained on all of his content. He delivers the best, the most effective Microsoft narrative pitch, right? When he's out talking to a customer, I will put Judson in front of a customer any day. And so this bot essentially is training people how to deliver a pitch in a really confident way to our customers that's consistent around the world, right? We've never done anything like that other than like, here's 4 slides and hope you go learn them. And then everyone creates their own talk track, their own unique deck. This really helps people, trains people in a consistent way. When I think about the tools that I use, if you guys haven't used Copilot's Analyzer or Researcher yet, super interesting. They're way deeply embedded in the add-on, so you have to go search for them, but really, really phenomenal. And I will say the other piece for me around the tools that we're using is we are constantly, like, we take a commitment. Each of my leads takes a commitment on AI because there's a cultural part to your question, which is how then do we really use AI and get out of experimentation mode? Most people are using AI because they're experimenting at night. They're still doing their day job kind of in the same way, and then they'll do a night job where they're like experimenting with something. It's not core embedded into the way that we all do work yet today. And that was, it's evident in a lot of folks' areas, right? Because people are afraid, if I have AI do this for me, am I working myself out of a job? There is a real piece of that within Microsoft's culture right now, and every culture at every company that says, if this thing can do my job more effectively than me, will they not need me anymore? Right? And so you always talk about AI and human ambition, and AI is never going to really have empathy, right? It's not going to have the intonations that, you have in your voice, or the empathy you have, or the human experiences. It's going to be great at surfacing up the right data and having this like really intellectual piece of horsepower in your pocket, but it's never going to be the thing that's going to give you a hug, right? And so I think that is a core piece for us when we're rolling out and teaching technology. Each of us is taking an accountability where it's 20% of our job is only thinking about, how am I using this to do this function more effectively? And we're putting milestones behind it and measurements behind it. And it's an actual commitment that we have as part of our overall annual performance on how we're actually changing the business, right? I aim to save 30% of time by doing X, $10 million doing Y, and we're really holding ourselves accountable to those metrics. Otherwise, I'm going to be in experimentation mode forever and never really make a monumental progress on it.
I love that. And honestly, I wouldn't mind an agent to take over some of the smaller tasks that I don't want to do. I think the amount of people in the last few weeks that I saw like building agents for a set person to kind of, it's amazing. So maybe in the world we'll all have, a mirror version of ourselves to do all the things we don't want to do. Which I think is really cool.
That's really important, and something that like my team, we're focused a lot on is where can we build agents for ourselves. So like a lot of folks, if you're shipping AI, have gone through the deployment safety board process, and today it probably takes you a while to fill out that form. It also takes us a while to review the form, and then usually you haven't done it right, and so then we have to email you, and it just takes a lot of human time. And these are like experts, right? These are both like product team experts trying to ship product and responsible AI experts trying to, focus our energy on like the new novel AI coming, not just kind of the, repeatedly reviewing your compliance status. And so we've developed, new agents to both start taking the documentation you already have, letting you know where it's not enough information, letting you know if you haven't provided what we need, and giving you sort of instant feedback, and then also doing that initial passive review for the experts so that we can just focus on like what's actually interesting and where we need to spend our time. And that's just kind of one place we're doing it in responsible AI, but this technology has been critical for us to be able to do our work well for a long time now. We couldn't even, like historically, we were not even really able to, in an automated way, measure any sort of responsible AI risk. You'd have to go to human graders. It would take a long time. Starting with GPT-4, we were able to have, automated graders using language models. And that meant we could automate a huge amount of our work. And of course, we still want human validation at the end, but that meant we could have AI do a lot more every day, and then we could focus on kind of that last mile. And so really not just taking off the shelf tools, but figuring out where we can build with this to solve the unique problems we have has been really important in our responsible AI practice at Microsoft.
So Sarah, I'd love to hear, actually, speaking of the responsible AI, I know in your recent discussion in the FYAI blog, you emphasized the importance of embedding, responsible AI practices early on in the development process, right? And treating them as an early thought rather than an afterthought. Can you elaborate on how this integration has influenced the development of products these days?
Yeah, I would say, we learn a lot from sort of, let's say, the disciplines that went before us. So like a great example is security. When, the company went through the kind of security transformation, you learn really quickly that if we designed a system with an insecure architecture, there's not a lot you can like band-aid at the end when you want to ship it to fix those problems, right? You probably need to go and do kind of a major redesign of the system. And so the same thing with responsible AI, where early design choices and how you build it and steps that you follow throughout the entire process are going to result in a much higher likelihood of success getting to the other side. And so we try to infuse the responsible AI process into the entire life cycle, starting with that ideation and early development, and then as you're building and as you're testing, but after you ship as well, because it's important to make sure that you're watching the system in practice and you're learning from user feedback and you're monitoring for new threats and you're adapting to places where the system's not behaving as you expect. And so the journey for us has been developing sort of tools and practices that support each of these lifestyle phases for the growing diversity of AI applications we see as this new technology comes out. And, I think the thing that's great about doing this at Microsoft really has been that we have such a strong cultural element about this, so much support from the leadership that almost everybody understands that responsible AI is part of building with AI and it's part of their job. And that's not true everywhere in the world. That's a Microsoft statement. And so a lot of our practice gets to be focused on teaching people how to do it. Here's the new technique I need to learn, or here's the testing system I need to run. And so we focus a lot on both developing these new approaches and then attaching them to our existing engineering processes so people know how to find them at the right moment when they're going to need them.
Yeah, honestly, this is really important, and it's truly shaping the way we do things every day. So my final questions before we go to the live Q&A part of things, which is just more questions, but I think we touched a bit more about, how you weave a culture of diversity, equity, inclusion, belonging in your orgs. I think we talked a bit about collaboration, a bit about, shaping different practices, but I'd love to hear maybe from you, Jeana, first. How, do you integrate that as part of your, what practices do you take to help that?
To make sure that the diversity, equity, inclusion stay relevant. Yes. We don't usually use AI or the technologies, because I feel like that's such more of a human element, right? Ensuring all voices are heard is a very important part of what we do. Understanding that not everybody feels comfortable speaking up in a meeting or making a decision in a meeting. They need to go think about it. And so we just try to provide other forms and other ways of getting to an answer rather than every meeting has to have the final decision, right? I think that's can be challenging for both sides. Some people like the decision made in the meeting, and some people like to just take a moment to weigh in on it. But I think for us, just making sure we're celebrating the biggest challenge for me in all of this, right, is the speed at which we're operating. There's no release valve, right? We used to have 2 to 3 year release valves where we would ship something on a CD or DVD, and we'd have these big launch parties and these big moments. And then we introduced cloud, and cloud was coming out every day with new features and functionality. And we were like, wow, how do you create release valves in cloud? And then it became, this era of AI where it's like every millisecond, right? There's a new change. And so that is where we as humans need to interject kindness, interject slowing down for a moment, interject this piece of just a release valve to celebrate everything that's happening around us. Take a minute to say thank you. And so we are trying to be a lot more thoughtful about appreciation, saying thank you in the moment, giving good constructive feedback in the moment, and just I think just being more respectful as an organization, because it's so easy to get caught up in the freneticism that we're all in now, right? And to forget about that. And at the end of the day, as far as I know, humans aren't going anywhere anytime soon, right? So we are still a major component of this earth, and it's remembering to take a moment to slow down in order for us to be able to speed up. I always tell a team, like, hey, you don't need to be the first one to answer an email. You don't need to be the first one to do this. Just take a beat, and let's make sure we're thoughtful about this. And so when we're thoughtful about it, then we can be much more inclusive and create a sense of belonging for people, because again, you're stopping, you're paying attention to what's going on around you. And I go back to this thing of just being present, right? How do you show up in life, show up in meetings, be present? And so you can see different people's body languages. You can see what the sentiment is rather than waiting for signals twice a year, right? Like that's just crazy for me when we do that. And so I just think about that more as the human side rather than the technology side of how we're really ensuring that stays a core component to our values as a company.
Thank you so much, Jeana.
Add to that and say, I completely agree that it is really the culture and the culture of how you operate your team every day. I mentioned earlier both about strengths and collaboration. So one of the things I try to emphasize in my team and when I'm coaching, people is like, we cannot do responsible AI without all of these different disciplines. And so when my lawyer calls and says, I'm worried about this thing, and maybe they're describing it in a way that's not technically accurate, it would be easy for me to just dismiss them, like, oh, they don't understand the technology. But they do understand something different, right? They understand the law. They might understand different types of risks that we've seen manifest in the past. And so recognizing that that's their strengths, and I definitely want their strengths as part of my final solution, makes it easier to say, okay, I see what they're bringing to the table. It's important for me to spend time engaging in this and educating them so that together we can get to a unique solution. And so this is something I try very much to instill in my team, is make sure that we understand that every person on the team, every person we partner with, right, they're bringing something to the table. Every customer, even though sometimes they can be frustrating, right, every customer has something interesting to say that you want to listen to. And so making sure that you're really looking for what each person, what each organization is bringing, and thinking about that in, how you can make your work stronger as a result of it. And so that is certainly part of it. I think we try to have a culture of kind of flexibility and transparency. I'm located in New York City, and so we're in different time zones, for example. And well, most of the time, some of my team works West Coast hours. Sometimes they can't because there might be, some family gathering or something. And so being, very strong culture of feeling comfortable to say, like, hey, here's where I'm at this evening and I won't be available, but, in general, I'm available, right? And just kind of letting people know what your constraints and how things fit together, I think is another thing that's important to make it all kind of fit together and make the culture feel inclusive. And then, of course, we need to make sure the products themselves are actually inclusive and work for different groups of people. And so that's, part of the responsible AI mission itself. And we learn a lot from accessibility and from work on fairness and others around that. So I don't know, those are probably my top of minds around this, but there's certainly many, many different things that add up to creating this feeling. You can't just go do one thing or say one thing.
Yeah, I love that. Honestly, even in data, you feel like, you have the data, you feel like you're so close to the product, but then you sit down, you interview customers, you talk to them, and you realize, wow, I do not have the full picture. So it is really important to be empathetic, to listen, to kind of, take these signals, not just, from one place, like our annual surveys. So I love that. All right. So this concludes our panel, but we do have a few Q&As from our audiences. So maybe let's take the first one. I'll go through. So this is a good one. So we find ourselves in this high pressure time in the tech world. And I think about that we both, shared the balance between leading your team with focus on culture. So how do you balance the short-term performance pressure with the long-term strategy or goals? And this is a question from Kelsey.
First of all, can I just say hi, Kelsey? Good to see you in writing. So fun. I love seeing people's names that I know and love. If you don't mind, I'll start on that one. For me, I always start with what do we want people to be saying about us in the industry, in the public, wherever, in the next 1 to 2 years. And we start from there. And then we work back on, okay, what are the short-term goals we need to hit in order to make those statements become true? And so, sorry, my kids are knocking on the window outside my door, outside my office, telling me it's time for me to to get them. So yeah, for me, it's really like I always start with, what do we want people to say about us? What's the goal? What's the end state, right? And when we get an agreement on sort of where the long pole is, then we can work back from there with really short-term milestones, and then you can calibrate, right, every period to say, are we getting closer to that statement? Or are we getting further away from it? And it really helps to get alignment when you have those short-term milestones and measurements in place, that you can see if you're going in the right direction. And to be honest, like sometimes our North Star direction changes because of some dynamic, right? And so that's, for me, is how we kind of balance the short-term wins, and you can show kind of proof or progress toward those things, but also keeping your eye on the long-term prize.
I think our team has interesting challenges around this, and everyone has variations of this, but we're basically blocking ship for every team in the company, right? If a technology comes out and we don't know how to address a significant risk, it's going to be pretty hard for us to ship it. Or we get new technology from OpenAI and other providers, and we ship it the same day as those providers. And so we have, quite the fun sprint to test, to get up mitigations, to make sure we've got everything in place. And so sometimes it just feels like the world is happening to you, right? And you're kind of just on this treadmill. But everyone on the team has signed up for the mission to make sure that AI systems are safe and secure by default, so that when you show up and use them, that it is, giving you that experience that you need out of the box. And then, of course, there's always more you can do on top of that. And so I think we sort of understand concretely what our goals are. And so even the fire drills, we understand how they're contributing to our goal or why it's a fire drill. And then I think the second thing is really having reusable patterns. And an example is that, something we found very early on when we're shipping these AI systems is you can't have a one-size-fits-all policy. What I need in an education context in elementary schools is probably going to be pretty different than what I need in law enforcement, right? And so we've built our systems to be customizable or configurable. And then in some cases where we find that, hey, if we make it too configurable, that might sort of create risk, right? Allow someone to have sort of outsized harm, then we would make those configurations only available to trusted customers. And so this is a pattern we've been doing for a long time. And so when we see a new set of risk and something's about to ship and we're like, we don't know what we're going to do, we're like, oh, we should make it customizable, and then we should only allow these ones for trusted customers, right? And so we have these kind of playbooks that we pull off the shelf. And so it helps it feel like we're building a foundation and we're building a pattern and we're building a practice, and not just we're, randomly doing stuff every day. And so I think kind of this combination of knowing what you're trying to achieve, having some conviction on how you're supposed to be achieving it, but then being very agile and sort of dynamic to where you're applying that at any given moment, given how the industry is changing, I think is one of the ways that we handle this. But it's a challenge every day. Like this is a question I think as leaders we're all asking ourselves, and we're sharing notes and everything. So it's not just, oh, we've all got it figured out, right? We're all kind of, learning together. I don't know that there's ever been an industry that's moved at this rate. And so figuring out how to do that is innovation that Microsoft is trying to drive as well.
Yeah, no, I feel that. So solid foundation, iterative growth, and I think that's done, I like to say in experimentation, that's what we preach. And it seems like this is the way forward in a lot of these areas. All right. So I think this is our final question for the day from Carmen. You've both shared a number of ways that your team has been leveraging AI and agents. How are your teams sharing across the company all these great things that's been done to leverage AI? Imagine where they can learn about all of these things. Anyone can start, whoever's ready.
Sarah, do you want to go or do you want?
Sorry,
I feel like I've been going first.
Mine's freezing a little bit, so I missed part of the question there.
I will go, Sarah, and then I will answer it in the form of a question. She was just talking about how are your teams sharing across the company all the things you're doing to leverage AI and all the experiments that we're running. And I'd say from my perspective, A couple of different things. One, like the AI Skills Fest was an experiment that we were running just to see, like, could we do an event that was community from the ground up and not, a 30, $40 million event that we put on for a couple days? Can we do something that was community driven and really based on what customers were asking us to go do? And so we kind of took an unconventional approach and were met with a bit of resistance early on. And then all of a sudden people got on board and it kind of took off. And so we share across the company by just making sure we're embedded in the right forums, right? There's so many people who are influential across the engineering teams who've been really helpful. And I would argue like our marketing counterparts. And so we spend a lot of time socializing. Hey, do we think this is the right thing to do? Here's what we're experimenting on. We don't try to do too many things, though. What I've noticed is, like, again, in this freneticism of like, there's 400 billion things that everybody wants to go do. What are the 2 or 3 things that we're really going to put our head around and, again, slow down so we can get a concrete idea of whatever it is that we're trying to do that's solving a customer need and filling a void? A lot of times these experiments are just coming up because people are trying to experiment and it's not filling a void. It's not solving a real problem, and people don't really understand it because there's 20 other things like it. And so that's where I think all of us just taking a minute to say, are we actually solving a problem that's real for our customers, is the number one thing that I feel like gets the most traction, and then it gets easy pickup with all of our counterparts across all the different disciplines across the company. And it's hard, though. It's so hard. We're like, oh, dang, we should have told so-and-so. We forgot so-and-so. There's so many people doing so many phenomenal things across the company. But the number one thing that I have learned over the years is, like, just go pick 1 or 2 hard problems you're trying to solve and get a solid plan around it. And then people typically always end up rallying around something that's simple and that they can be a part of. And so that's what we always try to do.
And I can share kind of a related thing, which is, I mentioned that we're inventing new responsible AI practices and tools all the time. We need people to be adopting those quickly and understanding that. And so there's no kind of one size fits all approach here. We have responsible AI champs embedded in organizations. We train them. So it's sort of a train the trainer where then they can, help spread that within their organization. We have a new how to RAI site coming that helps people go there for the latest sort of requirements and how to implement them in the latest tools. So we're excited about that. I mentioned the DSP agent that can help you sort of interactively understand the best practices and what's needed. We have lots of customers that want to learn. And so, we have an EBC, so that we're like sessions, so we're training the field on how to train these materials. We have a responsible AI trusted partner program where we're training partners to be able to train the larger ecosystem. So folks like Accenture and IBM are learning from our responsible AI practices and taking them out to other customers in the broader ecosystem. And so that's to say that, we're focused on kind of what's the core message, like what's the one thing you're trying to do, as Jeana was saying, and then really activating the Microsoft machine. Like, Microsoft's amazing. There's so many people that want to help on this journey. And so if you can plug in and help them play their part, then you can get so much more scale in kind of what you're trying to teach or what you're trying to achieve. And so it's really tempting to say, like, I should go present to every person individually on responsible AI, but that does not scale. And so really plugging into the ecosystem, I think, has been important for us to keep people up to date and share what we're doing.
Wow, it seems like there is a lot to learn from. And then feel free, both of you, if you want to share any resources or links in the chat. I'm sure our audience would love to read on that. And then probably they'll pick what resonates with them and start learning. Awesome. I know we're at time, right on time. Thank you both for such a great discussion. It was lovely having you, and thank you for joining us today and for all our audiences. I want to make sure if you have any closing remarks you want to say before we end this. Jeana?
I just want to say thank you for having us. Like, this was, Sarah, it was great to meet you. We haven't met before, and so it's great to meet you. And just appreciate you guys taking the time to have us here. It's amazing to see a group of people like this coming together, and I love the momentum you guys have created in this space. It's just awesome to see. So really good job.
Yeah, I completely agree. And this has been so enjoyable, and excited to, come back and participate in the community myself.
We can't wait for that, honestly. Thank you all for joining, and have a lovely rest of your day. Take care. Bye-bye.